Welcome everyone to the Locker Room, where there's no scripts, just real talk about domains, Web3, digital identity, and what's happening in our space. Today we're going to be talking about the importance of anchoring Web3 domains to DNS. My name's Bailey Comyns. I'm head of marketing at Orange Domains, the registry operator for .locker. And joining us today is Don Ruiz, the general manager of Orange Domains. Don, thank you for joining us. I think this is going to be a great topic for us to cover today.
Yes, it's very topical. Lots of discussions going on in the industry, and it's something that I recently wrote about not too long ago. So excited to dig a little deeper on this one.
Yeah, we'll definitely drop the blog link into our show notes. But let's get into it. We've had a lot of partners reach out and ask us why Web3 domains, why Web3 domains anchoring to DNS. Let's talk about why that's so important.
Yeah, from our perspective, there's lots going on in the industry, in the internet and technology, the advancement of Web3 and AI and these different technologies and the convergence of these technologies, and achieving, the real growth is when enterprise and consumers start to really adopt this and not just the developers on the back end. And so to achieve that, we believe that you need a unified digital identity that can work across the internet.
Mm-hmm.
And to do that, we feel that the DNS offers the best framework using a fully qualified domain name.
Yeah.
And there's a lot there to unpack. The fully qualified domain name, you can add a website and hosting and digital certificates and use it but the one thing that the DNS offers that Web3 doesn't today is the verifiability of that. It's a chain of trust.
Yeah.
Right. And you and I have talked about this. It's, you have the root and the TLD and the user. And that has been built over the last 30 plus years. And it adds that security and reliability and resilience that the DNS is built on.
Right.
And so having this as the anchor piece for these Web3 identities, we think is going to be extremely important for the advancement of the internet.
Yeah. And I think we're seeing the proof right now as, ENS, Ethereum name service, has been very much involved in ICANN and has been advocating for DNS anchored Web3 domains, especially lately. I've been seeing a lot of chatter on X from them about that. We've been seeing TLDs kind of move towards this. So I think we're definitely moving in the right direction. Others share our vision. We're not just, shouting this into the void. Others are joining in.
Yeah, they are. We have always said that we're early, not wrong.
Yes.
Stand by that. And the approach that we've taken with .locker and our minting as a service, white label service for other TLDs is, that anchoring, right, of trust that ensures the digital identity actually, achieves this level of security, control, and self-ownership for the users, right? We want to be able to grant users complete control of their online identity, but, it needs to be secure and it has to have a level of trust behind that.
Yeah.
Right? When they talk about immutable transaction history, and that's great, and that certainly adds to a trust, but identifying the users and identifying, who these people actually are using these is where the DNS kind of adds a lot of value in this solution and this connection from domain names or DNS names to Web3 digital identities.
Right. Because trust is really the key behind, scaling. We're not going to see mass adoption without that trust behind it. Mass adoption from corporations, from businesses, and from individuals. We're not going to see people get on board unless they trust the system and trust, all the technology behind it.
Yeah, they're going to get on board until there's a catastrophic event or multiple catastrophic events where they realize that, having a trusted root and having verifiability of the either people or AI agents that are using the
Yeah.
to transact online can be positioned or can be used in such a way that it is understood and is audible, and there's actually an enforceable type of process in place that ICANN and the DNS has when something doesn't go
Yeah.
right, or when there are some, you know, some malicious type of actions, that there's a framework in place to kind of prevent this, or at least have some accountability of the users that are using this.
Yeah, and this definitely goes against the Web3 ethos, right? Where it's about decentralization and not having third parties involved and all that. So I think this is where it's going to get tricky to kind of balance it all. And if you watched last week's episode with Bilal, he definitely gets into this a little bit of how do you balance both. And I think this is where, having all the players at the table to discuss this is important. And I think that's really where ICANN has been going lately, having the right people in the room to kind of figure this all out. And it's not going to happen
Yeah,
overnight. We know how ICANN works.
yeah, for sure. And we're starting to see that,
Yeah.
like even with .locker, right? We're starting to see some good traction in the adoption of .locker and the conversions of, users that just buy a domain name to using their Web3 digital identity. For our target audience, I believe it's close to 28% being converted, which is really good
Yeah.
at this point. And I know that there was a report that you sent over to me recently
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
had some.
It's the global domain report from Internet X. I'm just looking at my notes for the metrics right here so I don't misspeak. But there is a little Web3 section in the global domain report this year, which was encouraging for us. And there's also some great metrics in there. I'll get into them. So the one that stood out to me was 41% of respondents own or are considering a Web3 domain. So this one stood out to me because we know that Web3 domains are a growing category. We know that the infrastructure is still being developed. And we know that there's a pretty big educational barrier happening with Web3. But almost half of respondents are engaging with the concept of a Web3 domain name. So even though, the category hasn't been fully developed, people are interested and people are taking notice of Web3 domains. So we're moving in the right direction. And then the other metric that stood out was 39% of respondents believe that payment simplicity will drive adoption. And that one stood out to me because this is precisely what .locker was, built to deliver. And, it goes beyond payments. .locker can also facilitate, credentials and gamer tags and all these different things on Web3. But payments is definitely the largest use case and what people are very much used to, associating with Web3.
Yeah, it's that payments and transaction. I just want to kind of mention one thing is so important because on the blockchain and transacting using cryptocurrencies can be done and is being done by AI agents in a seamless way, where traditional banking institutions, their process to transact and the validation and to log in and the 2FA and all of these things prevents these AI agents from seamlessly transacting for users.
Yeah.
So the use of AI agents need to be, and they say that, the next billion users on the blockchain are going to be AI agents. And that's a big number.
Yeah.
But how are these AI agents going to be verified,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
And
Right.
trusted,
Right.
right? They need to be trusted. They need to be identified. You need to determine which ones are actually legitimate
Yep.
and which ones are not legitimate. Because anybody can go get a dot whatever Web3 identity and present itself on the,
Right.
on the internet as a legitimate
Agent.
agent or source, but there's no verifiability behind it,
Right. Right.
right? And so, again, this whole notion of AI agents kind of using and transacting on behalf of users or corporations or technologies is wonderful and it's great, and we're certainly heading there. But there needs to be a framework in place for understanding which AI agents are safe and trustworthy and which ones aren't. There's that know your agent framework that's being developed and has been adopted by certain groups as well. And again, the authentication piece and or authorization is what the DNS is the biggest advantage and offers when you enter a Web3 digital identity to a Web2 domain name.
Yeah.
Because it's been established for years, and the chain of trust from root to TLD to user, with all of the regulatory framework pieces in place and brand protectionisms and UDRPs and all of the stuff that ICANN has developed, and these tools over the years to create a secure, reliable, and safe and trustworthy infrastructure is what we believe the Web3 digital identities need to adopt as well.
Right. I think it's akin to, you wouldn't, put your, money into a bank account that wasn't verified or accredited or whatever. Like you need some sort of trust or verification or some sort of anchor to make you feel better. And it's the same with Web3. And that's where DNS comes in.
Yeah, and it's not so much for it to work. Like, we know that it can work with untrusted, unverified, identities and agents. It's how do we get the mass adoption? How do we get this into the hands of the consumers and the people and the enterprises, which really drive internet usage and the economy?
Right.
And that's where that layer of trust and authentication and the piece that DNS really brings to the table in this whole equation.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think when you really sum it all up, once again, .locker is early, but not necessarily wrong with the solution that we're serving up. Everything's still developing around it, but we're here, positioned, ready for when everyone's ready to jump on board.
Yeah, that's true. We have a lot of work to do still, and we're still developing our solution.
We say that over and over.
It is something that we feel we're in a very strong position. And we'll find out, more and more as this kind of evolves. As you know, I'm heading to Manchester for the Contracted Party Summit next week. Meeting set up with registrars and registries and some groups that are going to be applying for the next round. Some of these groups are applying for Web3 centric types of names. Have conversations or continued conversations with them around our minting as a service solution, and we'll see, where we're at as we get further down the line to reveal day for the applications, which will be later this year. But we're just having some early conversations. So far, so good, and seem to be well received at this point. But we'll have to see how these conversations go and where these takes us over the next 4 to 6 months.
Yeah, there will also be a session on Web3 domains. So if you're interested, Don won't be leading it, but you might learn a few things, or you can get some time with Don and get his perspective.
Yeah, we're curious to see how this panel kind of the position that they're going to take on some of these things. I know that there is a push for ICANN to get involved and create some guidelines, but we'll see where we're at with that as well. Again, it's never a bad thing. if we can kind of get some consensus across the whole industry
Yeah.
on some of these solutions and how we kind of lean into these moving forward.
Yeah, lots of perspectives, lots of different solutions. So yeah, a consensus definitely needs to be come to.
I agree.
So I think that's it for today. As always, you can find us on LinkedIn as Orange Domains, and you can find us on X and Discord as .locker. And thank you for joining us today in .locker room. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.